Bobby, we are live breaking down 4 games tonight with 2 best bets, and we start Friday night in Norman, Oklahoma. The Alabama Crimson Tide are now catching a point with a total of 40. This game is another rematch. We saw this game played just about 30 days ago. Insane yards advantage for Alabama. They obviously lost the game. Both teams really have sputtered on offense since that game. Alabama obviously got crushed in the SEC championship game, kind of like how we talked about on the show. And Oklahoma obviously hasn't fared any better either. That LSU game was kind of an embarrassment offensively. So here we are in this game. It's the lowest total game in the college football playoffs. Bobby, how are you breaking this one down?
Yeah, and I think the burning question here is the health of Ty Simpson. I know there's some rumors about a herniated disc in his back as the potential injury. And as I always say, once you have a bad back, you never have a good back again. Now, how that helps him with 2 weeks rest after the Georgia game and the SEC title game, we'll find out. First meeting, as you mentioned, big yardage edge for the Crimson Tide, 406 to 212 in that 23-21 win for Oklahoma in Tuscaloosa. That game closed 6.5 and 46.5, just as a note there.
Yep.
The game flipped on some turnovers, a first quarter pick, a red zone pick 6 by Simpson, and 2 additional fumbles by Alabama. Simpson was pressured quite a bit in that one, sacked 4 times by the Oklahoma defensive front. I do like the Oklahoma defense in general, and they are, top 10 in the country in basically every EPA and success rate metric.
Right.
But there is concern. The 3 best offense they played, Alabama, Tennessee, and Ole Miss, all moved the ball well on them, gaining over 400 yards in those games. For Oklahoma, I'm not and have not been a big John Mateer fan dating back to his days at Wazoo, especially when he plays up against good competition. I think he's fine at best, but lacks the ability to progress through reads. Kind of has too many problems in the passing game and hunts the big play that isn't always there. Right. Ben Arbuckle, great OCU, came over with him from Wazoo. Great at scheming out for Mateer, but he needs to also help him see it to throw it open, if you will. And the Tide have given up the explosive pass some. Do struggle with mobile quarterbacks, so there is kind of a little bit of a path to success there, likely popping a play or two for the Sooners since they lack the down-to-down success. Bama looks to be getting back Jam Miller in this game at running back. Maybe that helps Bama not be so one-dimensional. As we mentioned at the top, we've seen a sharp adjustment to the total with coming down 46.5 to 40 just from the meeting a month ago. Obviously, that's recent form. Alabama offense sputtering, Sooners general offensive struggles and kind of incompetence that's at points in the season. Right. Additionally, there could be some wins in the teens in Norman on Friday night. I think that's adjusted plenty at this point. I don't have a play on the total. However, for the side, I think this is a great live betting game. An edge will likely be had very early in this one. How does Simpson look early with the back? I don't know. How is DeBoer's script? We talked about that in the Georgia game, how much Alabama has gotten out to early first quarter leads in a lot of their big games. That's Kalen DeBoer. How does that look in the second matchup here against Brent Venables' defense? Something additional here, I think it'll be good leading, just the live betting this. I think we're going to get a clear early indicator on how the Crimson Tide are. I do think they're the better team. I do think they should win this one, but I'm not rushing to make a bet pre-flop.
To bet this game live, are you thinking, like, here's my thought on this, is that if Alabama gets up, I would be looking in-game under, because as we've seen DeBoer's game script, if you look back at the first Georgia game, you look at the Auburn game, Alabama kind of stalls out. They kind of run out of magic. Also, I just don't think that Oklahoma can throw their way back into it. I haven't seen Oklahoma get back into games either. So when you're looking at this game in-game, what are those things that you kind of need to see for you to make an in-game bet?
Right now, it would just be kind of just gauging how Alabama can protect Simpson, if that's getting any better in this one. And then, quite frankly, how he's throwing. He hasn't been as accurate potentially since the injury. So if he's looking in rhythm, I do think that the side in this game would be wrong, because then we'd have to move Alabama's rating closer to how we rated them a little bit, because they've been downgraded, multiple points since that Oklahoma game, where we've started to see the offensive struggles start consistently, right? And we're continuously downgrading them a little bit. So if we're going to bump them up kind of mentally mid-game, and the game is rooted in the close of this game, So that's where you potentially look to an Alabama side in this one. And I do also agree that potentially, maybe a second half under or something along those lines. If Alabama does get out quick, I do trust the Oklahoma defense. I don't think Bama, even if they have a good offensive game, they're not going to put 40 in this game, or maybe not even 30, right?
Yeah.
A good offensive, I think either team would sign up in blood for 24 and think they win this game.
Absolutely. Moving on to game number 2, the Miami Hurricanes traveling to Kyle Field. Miami currently catching, we'll call it right now 3.5, but we have seen the market come in on Miami. Current total of 48.5. Bobby, Miami really didn't get out of the state of Florida, I think, until October. This feels like this is definitely the biggest venue they're going to play at all year in front of 100,000.
They don't get that at home.
No, definitely playing probably the toughest opponent, honestly. But they've played certainly on the road this year. Yeah. Texas A&M, they fell obviously at Texas, what puts them down to the 7th seed in this game. Mike Elko, certainly the coaching advantage over the strategic Mario. Bobby, what are your thoughts here with Miami traveling to A&M, but it's kind of surprising, in my opinion, to see the money coming in on the Hurricanes?
Yeah, to me, this is the most interesting game of round 1.
Absolutely.
This is the game we haven't seen, and it just kind of pits two teams that are the same but different in certain ways. You have two quarterbacks who are very prone to interceptions at times, two exceptional teams in the trenches on both sides, but they haven't been tested by the opposing trench in similar quality very much at all. For the Aggies, much was said about the Aggies' SEC schedule that faced 6 of the 7 bottom teams in terms of standings. Plus a Mizzou team finished middle of the pack, but was on their 3rd-string freshman quarterback when they played. And then the remaining SEC game was that loss to Texas in the finale, which of course was the best defensive line they faced, and an Aggie team that relies on the run couldn't run it. So what did that do? That forced Marcel Reed to be a drop-back passer and make some plays, and he made some mistakes, throwing 2 picks in that one. Success on the ground has allowed Reed and the Aggies to hit a ton of explosive plays in the passing game to Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver, and they're probably the best wide receiver duo that Miami secondary has faced all season, and they've been susceptible to that kind of thing, the explosive pass play. For Miami, Carson Beck, similar to Reed, famously prone to mistakes, 4 picks in that game to Louisville that ended his Heisman campaign. And that was, he wasn't faced some pressure despite not being sacked in that game. And that's kind of how it went for the Canes, in their 2 losses this season. Miami is going to lean on the ground game, something obviously Mario prefers to do. And A&M can be got quite a bit in that area, just average in terms of yards per rush, top 30 in success rate, bottom half in EPA. It will be also helpful if CJ Daniels, the wide receiver, is healthier for missing the last couple of games, or missing some time during the season, I should say, giving Beck a second option behind freshman phenom Malachi Toney. Sidewise, I make the game 3.5. I like the game, at the early openers of 5.5 and 4.5 with the Canes. Yeah. I think these teams are basically neutral, or even teams on a neutral field. So you're just kind of giving the Aggies home field here. Do think the noon start does hurt them a little bit, despite charging that home field up for a home playoff game. I think that's going to be an awesome atmosphere down at Kyle Field. On the total, we saw some under money come in, as we've seen in a couple all these games, really, taking this from 51 down to the high 40s to 48.5, 49. There's a bunch of numbers out there. I kind of want to like the over at current. Miami has a pass of success on the ground, potentially opening up plays in the passing game. A&M and Reed are likely going to be able to hit some explosives. However, I've seen these quarterbacks throw the untimely interception. I've seen Mario Cristobal turtle in these situations, go hyper-conservative. Hell, these two teams played a couple years ago, and that's what happened in that game. We couldn't bet under fast enough in when these teams met a few seasons ago. I think it's possible both these defensive lines can take it to the opposing offensive lines in this one. This is a no play for me, despite the lean to the over. If it got a touch lower to like the 47 range, I might click it, but we'll see.
Yeah, you mentioned the defensive lines, and it doesn't seem like neither team would necessarily be able to hold a lead. So another maybe end game possibility as you're watching this one. if Miami got out on an explosive play touchdown, for example, and you were liking A&M pre-flop anyways, I wouldn't hesitate to jump in just simply based on A&M most likely can contain those explosive plays later on in the game.
Yeah.
To Oxford, Mississippi we go. The Tulane Green Wave catching 17 points in what we think will be John Summerall's last game with Tulane. The total is set at 57, and this is the debut of Ole Miss's new head coach and defensive coordinator now stepping up into the role. The offensive coordinator at LSU comes back to be the offensive coordinator for Ole Miss. And what makes college football so awesome, where you can be employed somewhere else but still work at your old job. Bobby, we've already seen this game happen once this year, and Tulane got dump trucked by Ole Miss. The game, the line was set in that one at like 11, and now we're seeing 17. I'm thinking of this one that we're not hesitant at all to lay the points with Summerall's focus kind of being on Florida, Tulane's inability to pass the ball, and now an Ole Miss coaching staff with something to prove. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, second rematch we've had since round one. You mentioned the Green Wave going to Oxford back in September, a 45-10 defeat in that game. And that game honestly was less competitive than the final score. Ole Miss had 3 first-half field goal drives. 2 of them were chip shots on like long drives that obviously could have ended in 6. There was a scoreless third quarter in that game between both teams. And Tulane's only touchdown drive was when it was 45-3, and there was like 3 minutes left. Tulane quarterback Jake Retzlaff was finished 5 of 17 passing, 56 yards before being benched to Brandon Sullivan, who didn't do much better. You mentioned that game closed like 12.5 and 61.5. I'd just like to note that for some of these rematch games, so you can kind of see where we are at now. Obviously, a lot has changed, specifically with Ole Miss. Pete Golding, as you mentioned, takes over at head coach after Lane Kiffin's departure. I do expect a charged up environment for Ole Miss here. They are kind of ushering in, despite it kind of being the first round of the playoffs and the end of this season, they're ushering in a new era after a drama-filled 6 weeks. In theory, Ole Miss should be able to have success again on offense against what's a middling Tulane defense. They just try to play bend and don't break, as we kind of talked about in the North Texas breakdown. Don't give up the explosive. That's why we saw like 2 13-play drives to begin that one. And that game go under, we kind of suggested might happen there. However, Ole Miss now has a defensive coach. Will he have a more conservative approach that we've seen from defensive coaches? Maybe. Do we expect the Ole Miss offense to be fully crisp under now LSU offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss Jr.? Lane Kiffin's not in the mix there, so those are factors you have to consider. For Tulane, they should want to try to run it and keep the Ole Miss offense off the field. They quite frankly got games scripted out of that first meeting. Rebels' rush defense is outside of the top 100 in EPA and success rate. Retzlaff, after ending the regular season banged up, didn't really run in those final 3 games, as we noted last in the American Championship breakdown. 15 rush attempts against North Texas. I imagine he'll once again be using his legs, since the run game with the running backs for Tulane is middling by American standards. Total-wise, this took some under money initially. We've seen a little bit of buyback, so on aggregate, it's moved from like 57.5, and there's some 56.5s out there. It's a little bit under where it opened there. Makes sense considering the lack of lane to see the adjustment down from the 61.5 close that we saw in the first meeting. An optimal strategy for Tulane being to slow the game down and limit possessions. However, I don't know if they fully can do that. So at this point, and they were probably going to need to play catch up. So I actually kind of lean over at the current. I think the late money's better here. Sidewise, there are still some 17s in the market still available, and I think that is absolutely best bet worthy. The minus 9.5 first half also worth a play in my opinion. But we like the 17 full game, as I think they will keep on the gas in this one. The gap between these teams, I think, is a bit larger. When you tune up home field, the difference in athlete, and realistically, I don't think Tulane has any direct strength to take advantage of what is an SEC caliber opponent. So give me Ole Miss laying the 17 in a game. I think they win by at least 3 touchdowns.
Right on. In our final big game breakdown of the night, James Madison, the winners of the Sun Belt and that exciting Sun Belt matchup against Troy, traveling to Oregon and Autzen Stadium James Madison currently catching 21 with a total of 47. Bobby, this is one where the head coach has already moved on to UCLA. Oregon also with some staff changes as both their coordinators are taking jobs. However, we think Oregon will be extremely focused for this one as they could go on a national title run here. Seems like just window dressing. Maybe Oregon just goes through the motions. James Madison, this is a huge step up in class for them. Obviously, the game they played against Louisville earlier this season, they lost the game by 14. Although I think the game was tied at the first half. Yeah. But regardless, major step up in class for James Madison. How do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, it's another one. Strong bit of under money here. 51 and 50s and a halves on open have now become 47 and a half and 47. Some of the logic with that one being Oregon, been banged up majority of the year, come in as 3 touchdown favorites in a game, and might just want to get out of this game kind of unscathed. Wide receiver DeCorey Moore, he hasn't played since the Wisconsin game in early November, but is practicing. And even Evan Stewart, wide receiver, was thought to be their number 1 going into the season, was lost in summer camp. He's been practicing, might give it a go in the playoffs. Will he give it a go in this one? I'm not sure. Maybe he sees a couple plays, but I don't know if I expect at least Stewart just yet. Oregon has leaned on the ground game in that absence. Noah Whittington, Jordan Davison. I expect them to do more of the same here. JMU has had an elite rush defense and a great defensive line in the Sun Belt, but it's a major step up in class for a team that's faced the 105th strength of schedule according to Jeff Saggard's ratings, and the only top 50 team they played in Louisville, having a really poor offensive line by P4 standards, so they weren't able to super run the ball. Brown popped an explosive in that one, but that was kind of all they got in that one. Where the gap is athletes, no matter what, going to consider most here is on the other side. Alonzo Burnett is fine as a G5 quarterback and as a passer on at that level, but he's going against the best pass rush in the country, or best pass defense in the country statistically. He doesn't have elite threats on the outside. JMU will try to run. They're focused on that. But they were held under 3 yards per rush in that game against Louisville earlier in the year, and where the Duke's offensive line got beat up pretty good. And that was with now backup quarterback Lee Sluka having 83 yards rushing in that game. I don't see James Madison being able to churn the success on the ground needed to step up and hang here. Even if the Oregon rush D hasn't been great in the Big Ten, they were really good against their lower competition non-conference schedule. That kind of more aligns to what James Madison's going to be here. So there's a single 20 and a half. There's some 21. I do make this higher in this one, and I ultimately do think that's a good bet. However, I think the better bet, and what we're going to make a best bet, is laying Oregon minus 11 and a half in the first half. I expect the Ducks to come out hot. We've seen that multiple times with Dan Lanning teams before parking the bus potentially in the second half and just trying to get out of there with how injured Oregon has been. That could also make a second half under look particularly good in this one. I think this is probably one of my favorite live angles that I might be looking at some point as the Ducks kind of just begin to prep for Texas Tech in the next round. If Oregon has a 17 to 21 point lead, which I kind of expect here after 30 minutes, I don't expect much scoring in the second half. This one ends like 38-10, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to believe that. I don't know, man. Don't you think it would take a big effort from James Madison early on? Do you think any chance they might try to throw a haymaker at the beginning of the game, some sort of trick play, onside kick? Because without that,
potentially,
this is the narrative handicap, right? Like if I'm putting myself in Bob Chesney's shoes, you've got to boost the confidence of this team that's traveling from, Virginia out to Oregon in front of that crowd. James Madison's really up against it as the point, and they're going to need something as a really a rally point. And without it, it could get ugly early.
Right, and then they're going to it's to be very important for James Madison to start strong. They're not a team built to come back in the way they're structured anyway. So in my opinion, when Oregon gets out to a big lead, that's going to expose Burnett as passer continuously because they're just not going to be able to win on the outside. And if they can't get the ground game going, I think this could become quite the run out here.
Bobby, before we go, I just want to talk to you about exactas and looking at that exacta market. I know you had mentioned that personally about maybe putting together. I think we talked about that on the last show, like Oregon, Texas Tech at maybe 18-1, or excuse me, I can't remember the combinations. It wasn't Oregon, Texas Tech, but
it was. I had discussed potentially Oregon, Georgia combinations.
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah, I'm still. I have not clicked those buttons in that game just because I haven't, quite frankly.
Right.
But I am looking for a combination of basically Oregon being the finalist. So Oregon, Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State. That's kind of where I'm looking in those markets. That's ultimately, I think, where we get to. I think the time off for Oregon is going to be really good for them. And that at least on the top half, I do think they're the most talented team up there and the most complete team. Potentially when/if they are at full strength. I'll be interested to see if they get a second crack at Indiana as well in that one. So, and then I'll be interested to see how that game's lined when we get there. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm looking in those markets. I do anticipate clicking a couple of those. I just wanted more books to kind of open that and see where it was. Kind of snipe some of the best prices, as we always say, shop around.
Right.
In that, and if there's only one of those places, which there was at the time of the first show, open on those markets, wanting to make sure we get the best price on those. So that's kind of the overall playoff bracket pick. I'll formally go Ohio State versus Oregon in the title. I will take Ohio State to win that game, but also doing a potential combo because at price, Oregon, Georgia is interesting to me still too.
Live commentary while we are doing the show. Friend of the show, Chase Kitty, also won the first half best bet. The under 26.5 in Oregon, James Madison. I apologize, Chase. I forgot. You are an expert in all things James Madison football. That's a great Twitter follow, by the way, if you guys are listening on Spotify or YouTube. Chase has all the updates on James Madison. So there you go. And then other friend of the show, Charles in the chat, he's asking if you think there's anything to do with any of these games in rush or pass prop total yardage.
Unfortunately, Charles, I haven't looked at those at all. So I don't have anything strong in that. So I don't even know what the lines are at. So I have not looked at those yet. Sorry. But
Charles, feel free to chime in before we wrap up if you do have any takes on any of these games. If not,
I'm not too much of a prop guy. So I just haven't dove into that a lot personally. It is something though that questions like that from Charles, and other just community conversation, I do need to start focusing on that a little bit more and providing value in those areas. So,
well, especially as we have fewer and fewer games left, as we only have
11.
Yeah, there you go. Bobby, when is our next show? Well, before we wrap this thing up, we're going to go December 29th.
I have a dinner that night, somewhere around there.
28th,
29th, 30th.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. You can follow Bobby at BobbyDigital2 on Twitter. You can follow the show at CFB900. Really appreciate you guys following along. Thank you so much to Chase and to Charles in the chat for their commentary tonight. Bobby and I will be back here at a time to be determined as we go into the second round of the college football playoff. Until then, wishing you guys the absolute best of luck. Enjoy Friday and Saturday night, and we'll see you soon. Adios.
Peace.